Welcome back to The Heat. We turn now to an in-depth look at Israel and the Golan Heights. On Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump formally recognized Israel's authority over the long-time disputed area. The move has resulted in strong international reaction. We begin with this report from CGTN's Jim Spellman.
During the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel claimed a stretch of Syrian land known as the Golan Heights. The strategically important high ground has been controlled by Israel ever since, but the UN considers it occupied Syrian territory.
Give this to the people of Israel. Thank you.
That was official U.S. policy as well until Monday, when President Donald Trump, alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, officially recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli territory.
Today, aggressive action by Iran and terrorist groups in southern Syria, including Hezbollah, continue to make the Golan Heights a potential launching ground for attacks against Israel.
The next day, via video uplink, Netanyahu addressed AIPAC, a pro-Israel conference in Washington.
President Trump again made history. He formally recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Now that deserves enormous applause.
But there has been little applause from the international community. Syria says it will further isolate the U.S. on the world stage. Russia calls it a clear violation of international law and may destabilize the Middle East. The UN says its position on the Golan Heights is unchanged. It remains, quote, occupied Syrian territory. Those who want to see Golan returned to Syria say they aren't giving up.
Trump is talking about a land that he doesn't have any right to talk about, and apparently he is a Zionist more than the Zionists themselves. And I think that many Israelis are still dreaming of peace and still admit that the Golan is Syrian, while this crazy person Trump is saying otherwise.
While the international community is largely condemning the change in U.S. policy, it is likely to be seen as a political victory for Netanyahu, who faces a tough election in less than 2 weeks. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
Okay, let's get reaction now from our panel in the region. Joining us from Jerusalem is Simcha Rothman. He is legal advisor for the Israeli Movement for Governability and Democracy. Also with us from Damascus is Mohamed Ali. He is a press TV correspondent. And joining us too from Ramallah is Moien Odeh. He's an attorney working on Palestinian rights issues. Welcome to all of you to the show. Simcha Rothman, let me start with you. This move by President Trump to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights has drawn very strong international criticism. Just today, the European Union released a statement on behalf of all of its 28 member states saying the EU, quote, does not recognize Israeli sovereignty over the occupied Golan Heights. What is your response to that?
I think that now, after the US, one of the, I would say now, the only superpower left in the world, recognized the Golan Heights, so we have one more than we had before. The Israel's sovereignty over the Golan is something that many countries never recognized. Now the US started, and you have to ask yourself, is Syria able to control its own recognized land? Syria loses land in the north for the Kurds in any aspect. She does not. The Syrian sovereignty does not apply to any part of Syria. Should it be applied to the Golan Heights, who is under Israeli sovereignty for so long? What is the basis for that? So I believe Trump's decision is brave and important, and it's recognized what has to be recognized by the rest of the world sooner or later.
All right, you did pose some questions there. Let me go to Damascus to try to get some answers. Mohamed Ali, firstly, how does Syria view this development?
Well, Syria rejected, of course, the government expressed its absolute rejection of the decision, of Trump's decision, and strongly stressed that such a decision, it cannot change the historic fact that the Golan was and will remain a Syrian Arab land. The foreign ministry here in Damascus issued a statement saying that the decision is a blatant violation and attack on Syria's sovereignty and unity. And perhaps the most important point raised by the Foreign Ministry statement was that liberating the Golan in all means possible is an undebatable right for Syria. This is according to international law, which gives Syria the right to liberate its land, whether peacefully or in an armed struggle manner. Also, the Foreign Ministry said that Trump does not have the right nor the legal capacity to legitimize occupation and taking others' land by force. A very important note also by the Foreign Ministry is that this decision represents actually Trump's highest level of disregard to international legitimacy, and it is, this decision, a humiliating slap to the international community.
Mohamed Ali, you're looking at this from the point of international law, which is fair, but the Israelis are also looking at this from the point of security. And to Simcha Rothman's point, that Syria may not have the capacity to control the Golan Heights.
Well, this is his opinion. However, on the ground here, if we look at the statements coming out from the officials after Trump's decision, the deputy foreign minister here, Faisal al-Maqdad, made it clear that the armed struggle is now an option on the table for Syria to regain control of the Golan. Now, the Syrian army is much more stronger ever than before. It has been got a very important training through the war that it was waged on Syria. The Syrian army, with the help, of course, of its allies, was able to regain control of most parts of the country, of course, after terrorists from over 90 states came into Syria and tried to topple the government. The Syrian army is much more stronger. The armed struggle and the military option is on the table, and Syria says that it is taking this into consideration.
Right.
And sooner or later, the Golan will be freed. And the Syrian deputy foreign minister made it clear that and the Foreign Ministry that liberating the Golan will be sooner than what Israel thinks. This is according to officials here in the past couple of days.
Okay, let me go to Ramallah, to Moien Odeh. Moien Odeh, how do Palestinians and others in the Arab world view this proclamation by President Trump?
First of all, it's not the first time that Trump and his administration doing the same thing. He did something similar a few months ago when he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel without thinking about the two-state solution or the east of Jerusalem or the Palestinians' rights in Jerusalem. The second big fear for the Palestinians now is that in a few months maybe the Israeli government will decide to annex the West Bank, and then we might face the same issue that Trump and his administration, they might recognize the Israeli annexation or illegal annexation of the West Bank. All of this could show one thing, that Trump and his administration was never in a position that they can help both sides or can in the middle of the mediation of peace process. It's not only this. I will also comment on your question to my colleague Ali and say that peace and security was never made by adding few meters or kilometers to this side or to the other side or giving them more weapons. Security built on building trust between neighbors and between neighbor people, and trying to show that the only reason behind recognizing the Israeli sovereignty over Golan Heights is only security is just one of. He tried to find any claim, and just he found the security claim because he thought it's easier than any other claims, while it was never the reason and will never be the reason for them.
Simcha, clearly this is an issue of international law. The United Nations Security Council has passed multiple resolutions calling on Israel to withdraw from the Golan Heights. It sets a precedent here when Israel annexes this, when it imposes its sovereignty over it. Will Israel be prepared to withdraw from the Golan Heights if there is some kind of security guarantee from not just Syria, but from the international community as well?
The issue of international law is not like what people want to think that international law is. Unlike between Israel and Jordan and Israel and Egypt, between Israel and Syria, there is never a recognized border. To get a recognized border, you need to have a peace agreement or a decision that the two states that with the border accept. Between Israel and Syria, there is only lines of ceasefire. We ceasefire in 48 and ceasefire in 67 and ceasefire in 73. The fact that this line is not a recognized international border according to international law means that it's not illegal for Israel to take it. Even if you put aside the fact that Israel gained the Golan Heights when Israel was attacked and not attacked Syria. So even if you put this aside, to say that it's illegal according to international law to Israel to apply its own sovereignty over the Golan Heights is just wrong. So I think that it's a matter of realpolitik to say who can control this area. Is the residents of this area will be safer under Israel's sovereignty than on Syrian sovereignty, which we know that Israel, during the last few years, accepted more and more citizens from the Syrian Golan and gave humanitarian aid because they were attacked based on their race or their religion. They ran away to Israel to get humanitarian aid. So to say that Israel needs to bring this population who lives under Israeli sovereignty today and throw it into the mess that Syria is today, I don't think that it's moral, and I don't think it's according to international law.
Mohamed Ali, what do you make of that Israel is not really violating international law here? There may have been an international border before the war in 1967, but that international border was obliterated by the war, and it's now a ceasefire line. What do you make of that?
Well, it is very clear that Israel is occupying Syrian Arab land. This is a fact, first. Second, according to the Syrian government, Israel should get out of the Syrian Arab Golan till the line of June 1967. Of course, there has been a lot of negotiations since the 1990s between Israel and Syria on achieving peace and taking back the Golan to the Syrian sovereignty. But according to the Syrian government, such talks always failed because Israel never wanted peace. It wanted both peace and land, and this is what brought the negotiations to failure. At the end of the day, this is an occupied land. Even the citizens, the Syrians who are still living under the occupation in villages and towns in the occupied Golan Heights, they all refuse the Israeli occupation. They want, they are sticking to their Syrian identity, and they do not want the Israeli occupation. This is first. Second, it's not a matter, according to what your guest says, if those citizens are safer or not under the Israeli occupation, or if they are safer under the control of the Syrian government. Eventually, they are Syrians. This is a land that has been occupied by force. This is against UN resolutions, against international law. And this is definitely humiliating for the international community. So it's not a matter of are they safer or not. Eventually, Israel is occupying this land. It is using its natural resources like water. And reports say that there are also gas and oil found inside there. And this is why Israel doesn't want to let go. But eventually, it's an occupation force, and it should leave.
Okay, Moien Odeh, we've heard two very different interpretations of international law here. What is your view on it?
I totally agree with Mohamed Ali that there's a big violation of the international law, especially after like the U.S. itself was part of Resolution 427 that said that the Golan Heights is occupied, and suddenly now with a new administration that doesn't care about any laws or any treaties, and Trump thinks that it's one of his companies and he can change the laws whenever and whatever however he wants. So I totally believe that Israel occupied the Golan Heights, and the Golan Heights is a part of Syria, and the Syrian people are protected persons, and then one day or another day it should return to Syria.
Simcha Rothman, this question is a bit of a domestic question on politics inside Israel, but Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing very crucial elections very soon. The New York Times described Trump's proclamation on Golan as, quote, a valuable gift to the Prime Minister. Does this look like it was time to help the election effort of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
I don't know if Trump is trying to help Netanyahu. He made this promise, for example, that my colleague spoke about Jerusalem and the embassy. He made this promise before he was elected, and he fulfilled this promise way before anyone knew when the election will be in Israel. So the recognition of the Golan Heights as another example is, I think, is a gift, but it's a gift that Israel as a country, as a state, accept. The law in the 1980s, the law that applies Israeli sovereignty to the Golan Heights was accepted. It was part of Israeli consensus, right and left. And Israel got the state of Israel got a present from President Trump. You can say that, but I think that to give all the credit for the Netanyahu in the election, I think it's misleading. I don't think that's the fact. The fact is that Trump wants to help Israel because a strong Israel means strong safety and a strong security in the region and in the area. It's the only country in the area that you can trust on that won't fall under the guns of ISIS or other extremist group, and the area needs this stability.
Okay, Mohamed Ali, a very quick response from you on what you've heard there. I've got about 30 seconds.
Yes, a very quick response. The annexation of the Golan in 1981 was considered illegal by the United Nations Security Council Resolution 497, which affirmed the legal status of the Golan as an occupied Arab Syrian land, and also its annexation is null and void. Thus, this is an occupation, and at the end of the day, it's very important to point out that the Syrian government regards that the U.S. decision of the Israeli sovereignty on the Golan, that this decision has killed all possible chances for a peaceful settlement for the Golan. Thus, the armed conflict and the military option is on the table of the Syrian government.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. We have run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. Thanks for watching.